Good morning, co-chairs. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ezeko Nkechi, and with me are my teammates Emelu Chidubem, Eraduri Joseph, Njoku Richard, and Maduka Chizalim. Representing the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, we are here to make a presentation on the hydrocarbon prospectivity of the Barents Sea framework platform. Our outline runs from introduction down to concluding remarks. My way of introduction will give a brief executive summary, a little bit about the study area, data sets and quality, and our workflow process. The framework platform has an essentially extensional tectonic setting with minor compressional events. The major source rocks are from the Harvard Formation. The major reservoir rocks are from the Orme Formation, while the clays are of early Triassic. Several trap configurations are inherent in the framework platform. We have the structural style trap, where we have the footwall, the hanging wall, and fault-dependent closures. We also have the stratigraphic style trap, where we have unconformities, truncations, channel fills, domes, and wedges. We are able to identify one lead, which we named the Jaguar lead, and 5 prospects: the lion, the leopard, the tiger, the zebra, and the giraffe. Going ahead to use the probability of success to calculate the STOIIP. Hydrocarbon phase encountered is on slide 5, we have the map showing the framework platform located in the Barents Sea. Also here is the base map showing the 4 wells with the crisscrossing 2D lines and 3D lines. Going forward, we're given wireline logs from 4 wells, also provided in seismic data 2D and 3D of fairly good quality. Core photos were also provided. For the course of this work, we used several softwares. We used the Petrol, the ArcGIS, the Microsoft, and the Interactive Petrophysics. So this is a table showing the different wireline logs that were given to us and their availability. These are the wells which remain the fin 1, the fin 2, down to the fin 4. We use the fin 3 as our well control because apart from having all the data sets provided, it also fell within the area of the 3D. Our workflow process on slide 7 starts with the literature review. We did an extensive literature review of the framework platform. We went ahead to do the well log sequence stratigraphic correlation and interpretation, seismic mapping and interpretation, down to the petroleum system analysis, play identification, formation evaluation, prospect evaluation, finally volumetrics and risk assessment. The aim and objective of this study was to assess the hydrocarbon potential of the framework platform using an integrated approach of core data, well logs, and seismic data. Our specific objectives were to delineate lithophases and group them into various species associations, to identify key chronostratigraphic surfaces, recognizing depositional sequences and system tracks. We are also able to map and interpret local and regional faults, which gives an idea into the trapping mechanism of the basin. We delineated and correlated reservoirs and pay zones. Finally, we generated a time and depth of structural map, extracting amplitude for lead and prospect identification. So I'll hand over to my colleague Chidubem to take us through the regional geologic framework of the framework platform.
Thank you, Nkechi. Slide 9. Under the regional geologic framework, I'll be taking us through paleogeography and geodynamics, as well as the tectonostratigraphic setting. This will help us better understand the basin history, as well as the depositional sequence of the various stratigraphic units within the Barents Sea. Slide 10. Basically, the western portion of the Barents Sea was affected by 2 periods of tectonic orogenies, the Caledonian and Uralian orogeny. The onset of the Caledonian orogeny commenced with the convergence of the Baltican and the Laurentian plates in late Silurian, and by early Devonian, both plates had consolidated together. In late Devonian, the divergence of both plates also commenced. Now, the rifting between the Baltican and the Laurentian plates means, or rather resulted, into the exhumation and extensive erosion of sediments from the hinterlands into the western portion of the Barents Sea. These sediments consist of the Bielefjorden group of sediments and represent the initial clastic infill within the western portion of the Barents Sea. They basically comprise of red sandstone units. Now, at this time, carbonate platforms had begun to appear within the central portion of the eastern Barents Sea as well as the western Barents Sea. It means that we had a change in depositional regime from a clastic platform to a carbonate platform. This carbonate deposit comprises of the Gibbs-Dalen group of sediments, the Jamellan group, and the Temple-Jordan group with minor salting and faulting. It will interest you to know that the Horn Formation, which appears to be the uppermost unit within the Jordan group, constitutes the major reservoir rock within the study area. Now, prior to this time, the rifting between the Baltican and the Laurentian plates means that the Baltican plate collided with the Kazakhstan plate, leading to the formation of the Ural Fold Mountains, since both plates are continental plates. And subsequently, by mid to late Triassic, the Ural Fold Belt had completely developed and experienced a westward shift toward the western part of the Barents Sea. The westward shift of the Ural Fold Belt led to the deposition of clastic sediments from the Ural Fold Mountain into the eastern portion of the Barents Sea, as well as the western portion of the Barents Sea. These sediments constitute the Sasendalen group and the Toscana group. Now, the Harvest Formation, which is the basal unit of the Sasendalen group, constitutes the major source rocks within the study area. Now, prior to this time, the rifting between the Baltican and Laurentian plates had already created a regional seaway between the Baltican and the Western Shelf. And in late Jurassic, an extensive transgressional event occurred within the entire part of the Barents Sea that led to the deposition of shallow and deep marine sediments within the regional seaway as well as within the western portion of the Barents Sea. These sediments constitute the Advendalen group as well as the Ungrunen group. Now, around the early Cretaceous, a volcanic eruption occurred precisely at the Franz Joseph Island, located at the northern portion of the Barents Sea. Now, this means that continental sediments migrated all the way from the northern portion of the Barents Sea down to the western portion of the Barents Sea. These sediments include those of the Tusk Formation, which is a member of the Sudbagen group. Around the late Tertiary, the topmost part of the Tusk Formation was eroded prior to the deposition of the northern group. So you see clearly we have an unconformity between the Tusk Formation and the northern group. In slide 12, we have a multiple deep section showing well little stratigraphic correlation across the study area. Now, you can see subsidence occurring at the northern part, which would have probably be due to the rifting between the Baltican and the Laurentian plate. Now, taking a lead from the little stratigraphic framework described in paleogeography, at the base here, we have the basement rock, overlaid by a initial clastic deposit, which in turn is overlaid by a carbonate buildup. Above the carbonate buildup, we have our Harvest Formation, which constitutes basically of marine shales and represents our major source rock. Above this unit, we have a mixed clastic and carbonate succession. In slide 13, we have two figures showing the structural framework within the entire study area in a regional perspective. Now, you can see it's not just within the Fiume Plateau alone, but we can also see those within other analog basins such as the Hammerfest Basin and the Lower Hard. We can also observe the influence that these structures are having on the different stratigraphic packages. Now, these structures are also observed on the seismic section, as you can see within these intervals, as well as these other intervals. Now, taking a leaf, as we described previously, we have the basement here, the synchrete carbonates, the post-street clastics and carbonates, the synchrete carbonates, as well as the post-street carbonates. At this juncture, I would like to invite my colleague Joseph to take us through the stratigraphic and structural analysis.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dubin. Now, I'm walking us through the stratigraphic and structural analysis that we carried out. We did this with several data, including well-known data, outcrops, data from analog basins, seismic data, and also our core data. Now, moving on, we first of all used an already established correlation between one of our logs, one of our wells from an interval within the Horn Formation with an already exposed outcrop at Spitsbergen, which is from the Kapduna Formation. Now, seeing here, we were able to establish waxstone and carbonate build-up cycles at the intervals that were present within this outcrop. Correlating that across, we knew that we had a very good correlation with on formation based on those species. Now we generated a divisional environment model to show the species within the on formation. We noticed that they were mostly inner ramp to outer ramp environments with some shallow marine and deep marine influences. Moving on slide 16, we carried out extensive core analysis and interpretation within 2 intervals from 2 of our wells, and these are the core photos that were given. On slide 17, we see here that there are several structures that were noticed within our core during our core analysis. We found stylites, some anhydride nodules within CO3 matrix. We found species such as co-species, coral bound stone, bioplastic grainstone, and some foraminifera parkstone, as well as parkstone and waxstone mixtures. Notable was this erosive surface at a depth of about 1,847 meters within that well, and that was corresponding with one of our sequence boundaries, sequence boundary 2, from our well log sequence stratigraphic correlation. Moving further on slide 18, this is a table that shows the 11 little species that were gotten from analyzing those structures within the course, and those little species were used to arrive at several divisional environments, including subtidal lagoon, sandy flat, mud flat, deep marine, and some shallow marine intervals. Now those environments range from beach to open marine settings, as can be seen during our core interpretation. Now moving on slide 19, this is a little stratigraphic correlation across all the wells within the study area, and we found out that most of our formation tops were correlatable across all 4 wells, including which we had our on formation and our harvest formation, which were our deeper horizon, our key reservoir, and our harvest formation, the key source rock. We also went on to establish the thickness of these strata across the 4 wells, and we noticed some subsidence towards the north. Now this subsidence was attributed to possible faulting. We also went on to carry out sequence stratigraphic analysis. Now this analysis was done with the stacking pattern from our gamma ray log, and we were able to unravel 8 bounding surfaces, which included 4 maximum flooded surfaces and 4 sequence boundaries. Now these boundaries were used to define depositional sequences, and we arrived at 4 depositional sequences in total. Each sequence contained the key sequence system strats. Within each, we had a low stand, transgressive, and high stand system strats. Faulting was also attributed to the possible to the subsidence that was seen towards the north. On slide 21, we used the thickness of the various system strats to plot pie charts that showed the proportion of one to the other. We arrived at a composite that showed us that 52% of the sediments were deposited during episodes of high stand. Now this was important for us to unravel the potential reservoir, source, and still packages within our study area. Slide 22 here shows a well to seismic integration, and this was done by convolving our reflectivity coefficients with our reflection wavelet. We got a good enough correlation coefficient of 0.85, as can be seen here, and this was used to pick reflectors that matched our maximum flooded surface, for example, and we also went on to carry the same method for our reservoir top, our intermediate reservoir top, and we found out that the reservoir tops should be picked on peaks, and maximum amplitude extraction was carried out as a result. Now this information was carried on to seismic based on the well to seismic type. We established various strata surfaces across the seismic section, the 2D seismic section, to understand the lateral extent of each strata surface. Now we use the seismic species within our 2D seismic section to map the basement and also the several strata surfaces packages as they built up through time. We noticed some possible carbonate buildup at the very first high stand episode, which correlates to the on formation at that depth from the well log. Now there's some possible effect of the faults on the strata surfaces, on the stratigraphic packages, as can be seen at this zone. Now moving on, slide 24 shows a model of the faults that were mapped during our study and how that has a relationship on the already picked horizons. As here we can see the relationship between the structures and the stratigraphic surfaces. Now I would like to call on my colleague, Jock, to take us through the petroleum systems and play analysis.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Here on slide 25, I'll walk us through the source, seal, reservoir presence, and quality evaluation, entrappment mechanism, geochemical modeling, and the events chart. From a detailed look at the dataset provided and literature, 3 seal formations were outlined. We have here the Knorr formation made up of discrete packages of claystone, limestone, and dolomite. The Herkingen formation made up of discrete packages of shales and claystone. Also, the laterally extensive Harvest formation made up of shales and limestones with their sealing potentials evaluated as generally poor to very good. Also, for the course of this work, one major hydrocarbon source was picked out, which is the early to mid-Triassic Harvest formation made up of shales and limestones, like I said earlier. And from a look at the organic content, the kerogen type, the T-mass, and the RO0, the source potential was evaluated as generally poor to excellent. Here is an outline of different reservoir formations. Here, in no particular order, we have the Soul Dog all the way up to the On. Bear in mind that the On is the major reservoir formation. We also have the varying lithologies, the major lithologies rather, as being sandstone and limestone, whether continuous or discrete, laterally extensive or compartmentalized, as the case may be. We also looked at the poropem character and evaluated the reservoirs. And also, I would like us to take a note that the On formation has a very good reservoir potential. Across the 2D and 3D seismic, various salient structural and stratigraphic features were mapped. Typical example here is the host block and the gravel structure. Over here on the right, we have successions of footwalls and hanging walls separated by synthetic faults. And these synthetic faults at different times on the seismic represent different rifting episodes across of the basin. So across the 2D seismic, a major unconformity surface was picked out. You can see it here on blue, which corresponds to the early tertiary erosive event that precedes the deposition of the Nordland group, and below which there were truncations and terminations as seen by the strength and orientation of these reflection surfaces. Here on slide 28 is the geochemical model, a 1D burial history model for a basin that is analogous to the basin of interest, and its name is the Hammerfest Basin. So over here on the right, we can take a look at all the different formations seen here, and it should interest us to note that these broken lines represent values that tell us concerning hydrocarbon maturation. So we can see obviously that our Harvest formation, that's the major hydrocarbon source, falls within this very important bracket of values as relates to the vitrinage flexans. This here we'll be looking at the event charts, bringing to book different moving parts of the petroleum system. We'll be looking at the different elements as well as the processes, their relationship and their occurrence across geologic time. So here, taking a look at the rock units, by that I mean the source rock, the reservoir, the seal, the overburden, the track formations, preservations down to the critical moment of entrapment and preservation of target hydrocarbon within the FEMA platform. Next here on slide 30, we'll be looking at the formation evaluation and lead and prospect evaluation. We'll be going through reservoir evaluation and petrophysical studies, play risk assessment, as well as lead and prospect identification. This is a log suite on which the different reservoir intervals of interest were picked out. Over here we can see the intermediate reservoir zone, the deeper reservoir zone at this point, and the ultra deep reservoir zone. Bear in mind that these different reservoir zones represent reservoir formations which were evaluated, and this table was deduced, giving us different values for water saturation, as you can see here, porosity, as you can see here, net to gross, their different depths of occurrence, as well as their lithologies, being sandstone for the intermediate reservoir, dolomitic sandstone for the deeper reservoir, as well as limestone for the ultra deep reservoir. Also, these various reservoirs were evaluated by means of a pressure plot. A pressure plot means the plot of formation pressure as against depth in order to discriminate fluids at different depths. Here we now have an OWC at plus 2,000 meters for the film 1. We did this for just 3 wells, the film 1, the film 2, and the film 3. For the film 1, we have an OWC at plus 2,000 meters. For the film 2, we have OWCs at 2 different depths, plus 1,800 meters and plus 2,300 meters for the fin 2, and also for the fin 3 we have an OWC at plus 1,000 meters. An OWC is an oil-water contact, and remember that the hydrocarbon phase encountered during the course of this war is oil. Next, I'll hand over to my colleague Chizalu to take us on play risk assessment.
Thank you, Richard. In slide 33, we would like to look at the play risk assessment. Having looked at the stratigraphic and petrophysical evaluation, for the play risk assessment, the color coded, the color green, yellow, and red were used for low, moderate, and high risk respectively. For our seal rock, we look at the thickness of the seal. And the thickness of the seal, our seal is generally extensive and also thick. So this thickness was used to give a low risk within this area and a moderate risk within the southern part of the map. For the reservoir rock, we're looking at the sand distribution based on combination. We have areas of low to moderate and high risk within our reservoir package. And also for the source, we looked at the depth to burial, where we have a deeper depth, we have a lower risk and also a moderate risk. These three elements are combined to generate a composite risk segment map that gives us an overview of the risk within this area and also the risk assessment within our prospective zones here and here. The next step was to look to the time depth conversion, where a polynomial function was generated giving us a reflectivity coefficient of 0.9. Now this coefficient gave us a high confidence in our time depth conversion. This time depth conversion was done for three major reservoirs of interest, the intermediate, deeper, and ultra deep reservoir, where we have our structural distributions, which gives us the possible trapping mechanism in our study area. In slide 34, we could see maximum amplitude extraction was done on the reservoirs, and this was done because our reservoirs were peaked on the peak. Now this maximum amplitude extraction shows areas of high to moderate amplitude extraction as possible hydrocarbon accumulation in the reservoir. For the deeper reservoir, we have areas of moderate to high amplitude extraction as prospective zones, as the zebra and the giraffe prospect. We also identified channel fields and lobe deposits within this deeper reservoir. And looking at it on a depth map, we could see the structural configuration of our zebra and giraffe prospect, also the channel field with lobe deposits. For the ultra deep reservoir, we identified three prospective zones as the lion, tiger, and leopard prospect. We also identified a lead which we named the Java lead. Now, moving to the depth map for this reservoir, we could see the lion prospect, the tiger prospect, the leopard prospect, and the Java lead. Looking closely on this prospect, the lion prospect shows a trapping style of a fault-dependent closure and also a moderate to high amplitude. The tiger prospect also shows a trapping style which is a fault-dependent closure and moderate to high amplitude. Now for the leopard prospect, our trapping style is a stratigraphic wedge and the amplitude is moderate to high. In slide 42, we're going to look at the volumetrics of these prospects and also rank this prospect based on our risk assessment. The first step was to calculate the stock tank oil initially in place, which was calculated from these various elements, which are the gross rock volume, porosity, net to gross, water saturation, formation volume factor. Where we have on the deeper reservoir, the zebra prospect gave us a STOIIP of 4.68 billion barrels, while the giraffe prospect gave us a STOIIP of 3.79 billion barrels. And on the ultra deep reservoir, we have 8.32 billion barrels for the lion prospect, 7.18 billion barrels for the leopard prospect, and 4.61 billion barrels for the tiger prospect. To reach this prospect, we have several factors, which are the source rock presence and its quality, reservoir presence and its quality, seal presence and its effectiveness, trap integrity, timing, and migration. This was done using a plot of detection of uncertainty against risk. You get arbitrary values to these factors based on several analyses previously mentioned. For the source presence, we're looking at the Harvard formation, which is laterally extensive, and also the TOC and Tmax values gotten. We gave it a value of 0.9. While for the reservoir presence, we looked at the laterally continuous sediment and also its porosity and permeability values, which we gave it a value of 0.8. Now for the seal presence and effectiveness, we gave it a value of 0.5. Trap integrity based on the structural map was given a value of 0.7. Timing and migration from our event chart, we gave it a value of 0.8. Now these values are multiplied and divided by the number of factors, we get a probability of success of 0.3. which was now used to multiply the stored values to get the risk volume. Now this risk volume was used to rank the prospect, and Lion prospect ranked first with a risk volume of 2.99 billion barrels. Also, the Giraffe prospect ranked with a risk volume of 1.36 billion barrels. At this point, I would like to call on Ikechi to give us a conclusion and recommendation remarks.
Thank you very much, Chizelum. Before we make our final remarks, we would like to discuss the hydrocarbon audit and dry hole analysis that was carried out. We used the following critical elements: basin type, the tectonic regime, structural setting, the trapping mechanism, the positional system down to the reservoir seal, well depth, and type of drilling modules. So for well 712841, hydrocarbon present was oil tied down to the Roy Formation, which was as a result of the fact that it possessed secondary porosity. For well 712861 had no hydrocarbon, but all shields were present from core photos tied down to Ishbourne, On and Fault Formation, so as a result of loss of seal and no seal present. For well 713141 tied down to the Fruman and Snat Formation, there was no hydrocarbon present, but from core photos they were all shields. So tied down to the fact that the reservoirs are compartmentalized by shields with probably two porosity. For well 7229111, tying it down to the Polar and On Formation, which was a completely dry hole, no oil shields, no hydrocarbon. This was as a result of the fact that the targeted carbonate buildups were not reservoir fishes. They were wax stones, cement stones with abundant marine cement. Now to our concluding remarks. As we discussed earlier, we were able to identify 5 prospects, constraining them by a composite common risk segment map, giving us a medium to high confidence. The Lion prospect was ranked the highest compared to the others using its risk volume. We are also able to identify a hydrocarbon lead, which we named the Jaguar lead. It had good stratigraphic configuration, but should still be revalidated. Correlation shows that our prospective reservoirs are thick and laterally extensive. Formation evaluation shows that it has good net growth of 0.9 to 1.0, with corresponding good to excellent porosity of 0.1 to 0.44. Risk analysis also reveals that the identified prospects are favorable. With that, we would like to recommend that the prospects and leads should be tested by drilling development wells. We also recommend the acquisition of 3D seismic data around nearby fields to unravel more prospective zoning. Thank you very much.